now it's time for us to have a presentation by David Steinberg, the CEO and inventor of Foureyes. It's a company that you probably are very much aware of. We've got several clients using it very successfully. And he's going to be talking about mining first-party intent data. The gold, finding the gold in your backyard. And, when we talk about that, David, I think everybody's going to lean in. This will be a presentation where we're really going to effectively reduce their cost of overall operations and drive their sales and profits up. So please teach us.
All right. Thanks, David. It's awesome to be here. Awesome to see you again. I think this presentation, this whole idea of first-party data and what the difference between first-party data and third-party data, it's really important to me because I think that it makes the difference in your success, and that we're coming out of the era of big data where it's like data, and we're starting to understand it's not just data that we need. We need to know what do we do with this data? How do we make it actionable? We don't always need more data. We need more actionable data. Sometimes we need less data and just more small amounts of actionable data. So mining first-party intent data, gold in your backyard. Before we begin, I think in order to understand how to mine first-party intent data, we have to talk about the leads problem. And in 2003, it was really talking about the leads mentality. And that mentality has now 18 years later, has now caused some problems in our infrastructure. 2003, the leads mentality was really more. Just, can I get more leads? A little bit of my personal background was, in 2003, I started a sustainable lumber company. And I didn't know how I was going to get business. And I just went on and started doing a little, pay-per-click Google Ads. And Google Ads was really new at this time. And all of a sudden, my phone started just ringing off the hook. And I could basically generate a lead for $5, $7. And I had so many leads coming in that allowed me a sales process where I was basically just cherry picking customers and just give me more leads. And that mentality was really sort of the internet sort of gave the promise of, hey, we can be this great neutralizer. We can get all these leads, more. And I think it's funny, you can look at, you might recognize this company, and I don't mean to call them out, but I think they kind of show you this era of more. Look at their stock price in 1999, over $200 per share, Auto by Tel, right? In that they were in the leads business. They were selling leads, and that game of more and more leads, OEMs then get into the action, and OEMs start, third-party leads program where they're basically retailing out third-party leads that they buy wholesale, and they're telling dealers, hey, we can help you use the power of the OEM to give you those more leads. And then you needed a way to manage all these leads, right? And boom, comes CRMs. Now you needed a CRM and you need a management tool. And how are you managing all these leads you're getting? And, the unintended consequence of this, of the more leads business, is we have to look at what we've done to our sales process. And really, this more leads business has killed our sales process. I hope you appreciate that graphic work, David. I did that.
That is a really scary graphic.
Yeah. No, well, it's after Halloween. We can do it again. We can do he's really going after him. So the unintended consequence, you killed the sales process. The more leads business, it's frustrating to me when I hear from OEMs and they're like, oh, dealers have bad process, but with no cognizance of what they're doing that's encouraging bad process. And if you look at sales process, you say, well, why do more leads kill sales process? It's that sales process is just it's a prioritization and efficiency exercise. And that's just at the heart of a sales process. So which lead would you prioritize? I mean, obviously, David, I'll ask you. Let's see how you do on this. This is a quiz for you. Which lead would you prioritize, a walk-in or a third-party lead?
Well, definitely, I'd prioritize the walk-in.
Yeah, that was a layup. All right, but the thing is, in the digital space, all the leads that we're getting start to look the same. And you could look at that and go, well, of course, I'm gonna prioritize a walk-in. But what are you prioritizing on your digital leads? How do you know which one is worth your time? Which one is, we talk about like giving quality responses. And the reality is if you sit in that sales chair, sometimes you don't have the time. It's not worth the time. You go, look, I spent 30 minutes crafting this great email for this customer. I sent it and I never heard back. And I've done that multiple times, and you start to see why they're not investing in quality responses. But again, so all these leads that we're getting in the digital world, it's like, how do we prioritize and efficiently follow up? And it's no sales secret that we need to bucket these into tiers. That the art of sales is again, prioritization and efficiency. So, hey, who are my leads most likely to close? Am I giving them the best experience? And, moving down the line. But efficient prioritization, and this is in inefficient prioritization, this is where first-party intent data really comes in. So first-party intent data. So again, just a definition of first-party intent data. It's the data you own that your sales prospects give you on your own website. But first-party intent data that your properties are generating, they can't be harvested if you're not mining it. So for example, right now, if you're not using a tool to collect first-party intent data, anything that's happening on your website right now, it's lost, it's gone. So you need to say, what tool am I gonna invest in that's gonna harvest this information? And I'll ask you, David, question, who is worth more of your immediate time? A dealer website lead from 2 weeks ago who hasn't responded to your initial phone calls or emails, or a friend of a friend who owns an old Nissan Sentra and had to get it jumped the other day?
As much as I'd love to take a Nissan Sentra on trade, I think I'll go with the dealer website lead.
Yeah, it's, essentially, this is, a first party lead. This is a third party lead, right? So you naturally are saying, hey, I would already prioritize that. What about this one? A lead on a piece of your inventory on your website, or a lead on a piece of your inventory on a third-party website?
That's easy. I'm going to go with my own inventory on my web.
No duh, David, no duh. So, but you look at these two leads that you have, and you think about the problem of all these leads start to look the same. And what's happening with these leads is you're already saying, oh, these leads are great, and you're not even using the first-party intent data. You're not even in the first-party intent data is going to tell you everything those leads are doing on the website. The first-party intent data is your ability to listen to them. The first-party intent data is where you start to see that customer who maybe sounded apathetic on the phone and is actually looked at the same vehicle 6 or 7 times. The first-party intent data is where you see buyers or liars, and maybe they're coming at you wanting a $50,000 truck, but they're filtering and doing searches on the website for vehicles, 45 or under. So they're telling you, hey, 45 is what they really can pay. You can get them in a different truck. First party intent data it's the listening it's the things the customer is telling us. And in today's era of personalization, first party intent data is the data our prospects are going to give us to help them sell them. It's also the data that's going to drive better remarketing. It's the data that's going to drive more relevant emails. It's the data that's going to drive more. What's better than instead of talking about saying, hey, are you still looking to buy a car? Can you come buy from us? The first party intent data allows you to say, hey, I have some vehicles you might be interested in. And it's the data that's going to empower salespeople to reach out. And this is all stuff, obviously, we've seen with our own products and with what we do. But when mining first-party data, I think this is actually like a really important distinction. Purity matters. And David, you probably get this reference over here to Scarface.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So what do I mean by purity matters? So first party, one of the big things with first party intent data is it starts to allow you to accurately prioritize your leads, which is really the heart of sales, is prioritizing where do you spend your time? How are you spending your time efficiently? But when you cut your first party intent data with third party data, you lessen your ability to efficiently prioritize. And all of a sudden you start saying, hey, I'm working these leads I thought were high probability leads, but they're not performing like high probability leads. I'll give you an example. So let's say I come up with, I have a service where I say, oh, you know what, I can take all my first party data and I can take my anonymous users, the people that haven't converted on my website, and I can, like, through a cookie or an IP address, I can link to a third party service that's going to tell me who those people are. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. Now I'm going to be able to see everybody's on my website who hasn't identified themselves. But you've connected your first party data to a third party data source. In that, what you're going to get is you're going to, the whole success is going to be based off how accurate that third party data source is. And so in the era of big data, what happens in these intersections where products are being sold to us is we're not distinguishing between first party data and third party data. And so when you're looking at a tool and it's got data coming out of it, you know, all of us tools, we all have data. We're talking about the data we're using. The real question becomes, where is it coming from? Is it first party data or third party data? And the data, again, that your website generates, when you're talking about selling prospects, is significantly more valuable than the third party data. When you start to cut it, it just becomes less pure, and you start getting into things where you can no longer, you're not solving the problem you thought you were solving. Now, maybe that tool in that example has a different application for it. You know, maybe there's all sorts of reasons, but you have to understand, are you making your data less pure when you combine it with these data sources? And so when you evaluate products, I mean, put your vendors through the ringer on where are they collecting their data? Where are they getting it? If it doesn't make sense or it's too black boxy, it's probably not worth this. It's probably not going to perform that well. If you can't understand where the data is coming from, there's probably, you know, it might not be a great tool to invest in at this point. And us vendors need to learn how to say, like, look, I'm going to show you exactly where my data is coming from. This is how we're collecting this data. And again, like, the first party data your website generates, it's the pure data that your sales prospects are telling you about. We'll go into some stuff, just some live data just to show some examples. So again, the lesson here is when vendors sell you on data they provide, where does it come from? And challenge your vendors on that and differentiate between first party data and third party data. Not all tools are equal. So if we're talking about mining for gold, you know, I could buy a $14 kit on Amazon, you know, and I could say, oh, now I'm a gold miner. But which one do you prefer, right? I mean, not all tools are equal. Every vendor will say, well, yeah, I have that data. And I think us vendors, I mean, part of the reason I'm giving this talk is internally I'm pushing on our teams to say we need to make our first party data more available to our clients to use in ways that they want to use. So I'm giving this speech partially to hold my own team's feet to the fire, because the data that your website generates, you own it. It's your data. The other thing, side note, is look at the contract language of anybody who's collecting data on your website. You know, I think big dealer groups are good at this, but make sure that you actually own the data your website generates. It's obviously really important. Let's go in. Let's do a little live data here. So just a little visualization of the first party intent data that websites are generating. So this is just a back-end tool where we're looking at first party data. So in the last hour, you know, 501, 506, 507 new leads coming off the website where we can see everything that they've done on the website. So I can see, okay, Mary-M just filled out a form, spin the website, looked at 3 pages. Now, your website also, when we look at first party intent data, we have 456 people that were a lead in the past and are back on the websites right now. So this person, Brianna, has been to the website 3 times, looked at 10 pages. They filled out 2 forms in the past. I don't even know who they are. I'm in demo mode, so it's like obscuring their PII. But right here, we can see, oh, what's everything they've done. So right now they're on the home page. They're looking at inventory. They're looking at this vehicle that they looked at before and filled out the form on is unavailable. So now you have reason to call them. Now you have things to talk to them about. They're looking at new vehicles. We know their browsing price. So if you're a salesperson, you're starting to say, how can I inform my approach with this customer? And we can see that this lead was from 4 months ago. So first part, you know, not all data is equal. We're keeping a record of this person still. and tracking this person 4 months after their lead actions did, and they still haven't bought. So it's important to know, they just landed on the website, so we'll have to see in a few minutes what they really did. But why are they back on the website? What's going on? And their CRM status isn't even set. So obviously we can start to see what's the value of first party intent data. I encourage everybody to start mining it. I think what you'll find is it will surprise and delight you quite a bit with what your customers are doing on your websites. So yeah, that's it for me, David. Again, I encourage you, challenge your vendors on where their data is coming from. Understand the difference between first party and third party, and get something that's collecting the data on your websites, because it's rich.
Absolutely, which will help make you mine properly and get the gold in your backyard. So David, obviously, a lot of information you shared there. So the first question that came in is, what was that tool he was using, and is that something that's tied into the CRM?
Well, that's, yeah, I mean, that I was showing the tool that we were from foureyes, our own tool, obviously. That's how we got it. And yes, it ties into the CRM.
Okay, so going back, because you probably saw some of Michelle and even before that, Guy Super and Sean Niffin's presentation. And as you can tell, people on the show are very tactically oriented, and they're probably not real familiar with foureyes, but in their own CRM, they don't see that data happening live. So tell us a little bit about best practices with dealers when they see those guests that are out there, because we've seen chat platforms where you can serve up a coupon or things of that nature. Kind of give us the little back end view of that.
Well, I think to answer that, I mean, the CRM is really the heartbeat of an organization. So it's, you need the data to be in the CRM, but the other place is that CRMs are not set up to capture all this data they're not a container for all this data. Like if you looked at the view that I showed where the person has 18 website visits, that's gonna just bombard your CRM with activity if you just push that into the notes. So like we've learned that we push the lead in, we push the notes, we push a link to it, but we can't just update the CRM every single time they hit the website. It's going to get messy fast. But then, you have the question of, okay, well, now someone's back on the website. What do we do with that information? How do we make it actionable? And one of the things we've learned is, we push it directly to the salesperson assigned. We notify them, and then we follow the activity in the CRM to make sure that they actually followed up. So I can see that, hey, if I sent this lead to David, I sent it to him at 2 p.m. Has there been any new activity since I sent this to him? So all that's happening behind the scenes automatically. And that's an important piece. But, we talk, if you just hide it, if you just bombard the CRM, you're going to kill the CRM with too much stuff.
Yeah, so it's almost a little bit like data enrichment to some degree. It looks as though Becky, I love how Becky and Chelsea pop up on the screen. They've got a breaking announcement here. So go ahead, Becky.
Yeah, we had a question submitted, so I wanted to go ahead and share that. It was by an anonymous attendee, but they asked, explain what you mean by own your own data.
Yeah, so great question. I mean, the data your website generates, the data that comes off, that is your data. But I think sometimes when you look at the fine print of contracts you sign, that's not necessarily the case. And so, look carefully at the ownership rights that the contract asserts. So if you're signing a contract with foureyes, you're signing a contract with anybody, who is the owner of that data at the end of the day? Like, I know with our data rights and with OEMs, for example, one of the things we have to carve out is saying that you own the data, we can't share the PII, that's all yours. But sometimes there's aggregate data rights that exist as a reflection of like OEM relationships, where you can roll up aggregate data back to the OEM. But look carefully and make sure you understand that, because if you don't own the data, then essentially they can remarket to those users. They could market some other products to those users. They could market other dealers to those users. So it's an important thing to look at.
Well, so speaking of that, one of the things that you've talked about, and in fact, you shared with me a tool where you all literally can go in and see what kind of remnants of information, code from providers is just laying out there in your website. And we know in algorithms for search that the speed of the website is really important. Can you tell us a little bit about that project? I know it's a little bit off this core topic, but if you could kind of frame that up as to the relevance of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can share it with you. You're doing a little bit of breaking news here. I'll share it with you. We haven't officially launched this. We put it on our website, and but we haven't officially done a full launch of it. So you can enter in your URL right here, and it will tell you all of the scripts that we see on your website. But one of the things we want to do is we want to look at it from an automotive perspective, because one of the challenges in automotive is you'll have the website provider that's putting scripts on your site. You have the OEM that's putting scripts on the site. So in that case, we show not just the scripts, but what percentage of those is that found on the website provider or the OEM. So you can see sometimes like, oh, this is an OEM script, don't worry about it, or maybe worry about it if you choose to, or this is a dealer website provider script. I don't know what's, oh, here we go. It's fetching. So I'm looking at this site, and this is showing me, okay, there's 192 scripts on the site. Dealer.com website average is 85.2. It's an FCA site, 83.2, and I can see all the scripts that are coming. The other big problem we see is what happens is that people put tag manager accounts. So what they'll do is they'll create new tag managers. So this right here has 22 different script containers on the website. That's a problem. And what's happening is every time a new vendor comes in, they're creating a new tag manager instance. And in doing that, that dealership is losing control of their data because people have access to these tag manager accounts that they don't know. So they've got one that's got this admin script in here. And I can see that 17.1 of FCA OEM dealers have admins. They have this other tag manager. It's got Facebook event tracking. I can go down the line and look at everything that they have. They have 2 instances of VinLens on here, which could be slowing down their site. So it's a little tool. We haven't released it fully yet. It's still kind of in beta, but I figured Dave, you kind of broke the news on that, so I'll let you do it.
Cool, excellent. That's a great share. Becky is back with another breaking question.
Yes, it might, you answered it partially with that, but we had a question come in from Arnold, and he asked, what is the best way to identify which vendors or previous vendors are still pulling data from a dealer's DMS, or how would a dealership find out and cut off vendors that they have canceled?
The DMS side, we don't do a lot with DMS data. I can't speak to the DMS side as well as I can to the website side. I mean, website side, use a tool like we have. Part of the reason we built that tool is that you used to be able to just right click and kind of inspect the code, and it was like pretty easy to do. But with tag managers now, the way they load, you can't see it there. So it's a lot harder. You have to be a lot more technical to see it. And that's why we built that tool. There are some other tools online that do similar stuff. I don't know if they get into the tag manager all that much. So I think our tool is pretty unique in what we've put out there. But it's again, it's in beta. We haven't fully QA'd it yet. So don't hate me if it doesn't give you the right results. But play around with it.
Okay, cool. So let's go back. The question came in. Obviously, this is someone you do business with, and he's trying to throw this out there a little bit. He says, when someone goes back to the website and they get a notification in the CRM, what kind of guidance do you give the salesperson? What have you learned collectively as a best practice?
Well, it's interesting. So when we first started with this data, one of the things we learned, we have to and I'm giving a little bit of a foureyes lesson that we've learned from basically mining this, is that you don't just want to dump all the data on somebody. That's overwhelming. It's like a data explosion, because then they have to sift through like service customers, solicitors, all of this other junk. And then the other thing we do is we look carefully at the recent activity in the CRM before we notify the salesperson, because a lot of times what will happen, for example, is if I'm a salesperson, I'll have spoken to you and that drove you back to the website. So then if I notify you now to follow up, it's like disruptive, because it's like, well, I just spoke with him. I'm the reason he came to the website. Now you're going to hold me accountable to calling him again. So the system's smart enough to, we had to build our system smart enough to be able to accommodate to that scenario. And the other piece is just to, we don't necessarily say when we tell you about a prospect that you need to call them. What we tell you is you need to think about calling. So you might say, oh, you know what, David Kain, I just spoke with him yesterday. He told me call him back on Wednesday. He's back on the website right now. Great. I'm going to use that intel to inform my call on Wednesday, but I might not need to call him right now.
Gotcha. So these are kind of digital be-backs, and even in your business, even though you're not in automotive sales, you understand the be-back, and they kind of self-condition themselves based on the interaction. And when Michelle Dinagene during her presentation talked about the fact that one of the best practices is sending the links to the digital retailing, in your foureyes platform, are you able to see the interaction in the digital retailing tool as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we basically see everything they do on the website. The only time we have a problem is if the content is iframed, and then we just need to add which one line of code to add to the iframe, and we can see that as well.
So kind of a best practice is, not necessarily get alarmed and, hey, call up the guy and say, hey, man, you've been on the site 3 times today. What's up? Are we going to be able to do a deal, or what's going on?
Yeah, what's crazy? So when we first launched foureyes and first started sharing the data, that was the big concern, was that salespeople were just going to freak the hell out of their customers, and that they were going to just call and be like, I can see her on the website. And so we trained heavily to say, don't say this, and we still do. But like, the reality is most salespeople kind of know it. And when you do it, you're going to hear all the time. You'll hear, oh my God, your timing's incredible. You'll hear, what you'll also see is there's a lot of last look stuff going on there, where a lot of times you might have already lost the lead or marked it as lost, or they're stopped responding to you. They might be interacting with somebody else, but they come back to your website to just kind of check some pricing, check some stuff. Well, that's telling you they're in market. Give them a call, see if you can get them back in. So we hear that a lot too, which is, hey, we took this person back. We had counted them as lost. They weren't when we called them back up, and we got sort of last look.
You bet. Just final thought. You watched the video. Was there anything after you watched it where you said, gosh, I wish I'd have added this, or this is something important I want to cover?
Well, I have a confession to make. I can't watch myself. I think you have the same curse. So I actually stood up and left the room until the video was over. So I didn't watch the video. I think it's a really interesting, I think there's so much to do with first party data. And I think that, I do encourage you, us vendors, we sell them this black box of data. And I think dealers need to start asking, like, where is this data coming from? And if it doesn't make sense, or you can't get an answer, I think you need to question it. Because especially as we're dealing with more and more privacy concerns, I think that we have to be able to answer that question.
Yeah, there's no question. And certainly privacy is going to have a lot to do with that. I know now that I live in California, I get a notification every time I go to the website, do you want to share this data? And it's kind of nice to know, because there's so much that's put out in front of us that we don't necessarily want to be exposed to. So very good, David. Thank you so much for being part of this and sharing your insights.
Thank you, David. It's great to participate. See you guys soon. Thank you.